What if I told you a dog who was thrown away by everyone ended up becoming the only hope for a missing child's life? This is the true story of Ruby, a rescue dog no one wanted. Families adopted her, then gave up within days. Too wild. Too stubborn. Too much trouble. Ruby was returned to the shelter not once, not twice, but 5 times. Shelter staff had made up their minds. Ruby was a lost cause. But then, a police officer walked in. And what happened next changed Ruby's life forever. This is Rescued by Ruby, the incredible journey from shelter dog to hero. A story about second chances, about never giving up, and about how sometimes, the ones we throw away, become the heroes we need the most. The shelter was filled with noise, barking dogs, excited tails wagging, hopeful eyes watching every person who walked by. Each dog was waiting for their chance to go home. But in the corner, away from all the excitement, sat Ruby. Restless, pacing, unable to sit still, almost like she already knew that no one was coming for her. Most dogs find homes quickly. Families walk in, fall in love, and the lucky ones leave that same day, tails wagging all the way to their new life. But Ruby wasn't one of those dogs. She was adopted and returned, not once, not twice, but 5 times. Every time, families had the same complaint. She's too wild. Too stubborn. Too much to handle. To the shelter staff, Ruby had become that dog, the one no one wanted. The one who always ended up back in the same cold corner. But what no one knew was that this unwanted dog was about to go on a journey that would turn her into a hero, and change lives forever. Every time Ruby was adopted, hope filled the air. A family would walk in, smile at her playful face, and take her home, believing she was the perfect addition to their family. But hope didn't last long. At home, Ruby couldn't sit still. She chewed up shoes, tore through pillows, and barked at anything that moved. No matter how much her new families tried, Ruby's energy was just too much for them to handle. One by one, every family gave up. Within days, Ruby would be back at the shelter, confused, restless, and just a little more heartbroken each time. The shelter staff had seen this story before. They started to lose patience with Ruby. Her file was marked with words no dog ever wants next to their name. Unadoptable. It wasn't that Ruby was a bad dog, she just didn't seem to fit anywhere. It felt like no home was right for her, and no family could understand her. Some dogs are easy to love. Some fit right into a family like they were meant to be there. But Ruby? Ruby was different, or at least, that's what everyone thought. Just when it seemed like Ruby would spend the rest of her life being passed around or forgotten, a new visitor walked into the shelter. His name was Dan, a police officer looking for a search and rescue dog to join his team. He needed a dog with sharp instincts, strong energy, and a spirit that wouldn't give up easily. The shelter staff showed him their calmest, most well-behaved dogs, the ones who could sit perfectly still and follow every command. But none of them felt right. Something was missing. That's when Dan noticed Ruby. She wasn't sitting quietly like the others. She was spinning in circles, jumping at the kennel door, barking as if she had something important to say. Most people would see a handful, a dog with too much energy and no self-control. But Dan saw something else. He saw potential. Sometimes, it takes just one person to believe in you. And for Ruby, Dan was that person. When Dan told the shelter staff he wanted to adopt Ruby, they raised their eyebrows. "Are you sure?" they asked. "She's a handful. Good luck." But Dan didn't need luck, he just needed Ruby to have a chance. The day Ruby went home with Dan, it felt like a fresh start, but fresh starts aren't always easy. Training began right away, and from the very first session, it was clear Ruby wasn't like any other dog Dan had worked with before. She ignored commands, ran in circles, chased her tail, and turned every training session into pure chaos. Sit meant jump. Stay meant sprint. And quiet? Well, Ruby had no idea what that word even meant. Most trainers would have lost patience, but not Dan. Instead of fighting Ruby's energy, he decided to work with it. He knew her wild spirit wasn't a weakness. It was just waiting to be pointed in the right direction. Day by day, Ruby started to change. Dan taught her how to focus, how to follow a scent, and how to use her endless energy to do what she was born to do, search and rescue. It didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't always perfect. But with every step forward, Ruby wasn't just learning commands, she was finding her purpose. She wasn't a bad dog. She just needed a reason to be her best self. After months of training, Ruby was finally ready for her first real mission, a chance to prove to everyone, and maybe even to herself, that she was more than just a troublemaker from the shelter. Late one evening, a call came in. A young boy was missing in the forest. His family had searched for hours, but the sun had set, and heavy rain had started to fall. Time was running out. Search teams gathered at the edge of the woods, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The boy's parents stood nearby, faces pale, eyes full of fear. And standing right there with them was Ruby, the once unadoptable dog, ready to do what she was trained for. Dan gave Ruby the boy's scent, and without hesitation, she took off into the night. Mud under her paws, rain soaking her fur, her nose never leaving the trail. Through thick brush, across rushing streams, deeper and deeper into the forest, Ruby kept going. She wasn't just following a scent, it felt like she knew this was her moment, her chance to show the world what she could do. Finally, after what felt like forever, Ruby stopped. Curled up under a tree, cold and scared, was the missing boy, but he was alive. The team rushed in, and Dan's voice cracked with pride as he whispered, "Good girl, Ruby." The unwanted shelter dog had just saved a life. As the boy's parents ran toward him, tears streaming down their faces, Dan felt a strange sense of familiarity. There was something about them, their voices, their expressions, that triggered a memory he couldn't quite place. And then it clicked. These were the first people who had ever adopted Ruby. The same family who had once walked into the shelter full of hope, only to return her days later calling her too much to handle. Now, that very same dog had just saved their son's life. The family knelt beside Ruby, no longer seeing the wild, uncontrollable pup they gave up on. They saw a hero. They hugged her tight, whispering words of thank you over and over again, tears falling into her fur. Ruby didn't understand the words, but she felt the love, the same love she had been searching for all along. The same family who once rejected her, now owed her everything. As the boy's parents ran toward him, tears streaming down their faces, Dan felt a strange sense of familiarity. There was something about them, their voices, their expressions, that triggered a memory he couldn't quite place. And then it clicked. These were the first people who had ever adopted Ruby. The same family who had once walked into the shelter full of hope, only to return her days later calling her too much to handle. Now, that very same dog had just saved their son's life. The family knelt beside Ruby, no longer seeing the wild, uncontrollable pup they gave up on. They saw a hero. They hugged her tight, whispering words of thank you over and over again, tears falling into her fur. Ruby didn't understand the words, but she felt the love, the same love she had been searching for all along. The same family who once rejected her, now owed her everything. Even after all the headlines faded and the awards were placed on shelves, Ruby's work never stopped. She and Dan kept training, kept searching, and kept saving lives, one rescue at a time. No matter how much praise she got, Ruby stayed the same energetic, unstoppable dog who just wanted to run, search, and make Dan proud. But her story did something even bigger. Families visiting the shelter would hear about Ruby, the unwanted dog who became a hero, and suddenly, they didn't just want the quiet, well-behaved dogs anymore. They started seeing potential in the wild ones, the nervous ones, the ones no one looked at twice. Because Ruby proved that every dog deserves a chance, even the ones who don't fit right away. And maybe that's the real lesson Ruby left behind. Sometimes, the ones who seem impossible are the ones who are meant to do the impossible. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true stories about amazing animals who change lives in ways we never expect. Because just like Ruby, every rescue has a story worth telling, and we can't wait to share the next one with you.